Okay, it is 6:01 p.m. and I will call this July 11th meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and for the record, we have Vice Chair LaFave is with us this evening over Zoom. And Ken, with that, would you like to start with the citizen or the public service announcements?
Sure. So we have two public service announcements tonight. The first one is the town of Chelmsford will convene the 2022 fall meeting, town meeting on Monday, October 17th. Articles to be included on the warrant must be submitted to the office of the town manager at 50 Billerica Road prior to the 4 p.m. Deadline on Monday, August 1st, 2022. Petitioned articles must carry the signature of at least 10 voters. For more information, contact the town manager's office at 978-250-5202.
Okay.
And our second public announcement is in concern about both the employees and the residents of the town, we are partnering with Care Solace, a mental health care coordination service to help you and your family connect to quality care. This is a program that's no cost. They will help you confidentially find available mental health and substance abuse treatment providers matched to what your needs and your insurance are. If you have any wish to reach out, you can connect to Care Today at 888-515-7881 or caresolace.com/Chelmsford-MA.
Thank you, Ken. Next up, we have public input. Do we have anyone in this room or the Zoom room? Yep. Just give us your name and address, please.
Lynn Marcella, 74 Carlisle Street. And I'm here representing the parade committee, and I just wanted to thank everybody in the town, the residents and the employees that helped us put together the parade. I think it turned out pretty good. It was kind of a new normal, and there were a lot of problems and issues putting some of the things together, but I think it worked pretty good. And if you would indulge me for a minute, I would like to do some thank yous because the broadcast went so quickly and the parade moved along so fast that we really didn't have an opportunity to thank everybody that we felt we should. So the parade committee, first of all, Paul Cohen and Pat Wojcik, who are our liaisons to the committee, and they were so helpful and wonderful to us, you know, with anything we needed. So thank you to the two of you for your help. The committee is consisting of Candy Chase, Paige Gillette, Jeff Hardy, Paul and Jen Hardy, Debbie Haywood, Eric Lindstead, Chuck and Lynn Marcella, Brian and Karen Reedy, and Rick Romano. And as you announce at all your meetings, we're always looking for new people to join, and we're going to be reappointing people, I guess, the beginning of August, the end of July, beginning of August. So if anybody is interested in joining us, we can always use new members. We had some great volunteers that helped us, a couple of them that were on the committee in the past and just showed up that day to help. So thank you to Rich McLaughlin, Kirk Marshall, Jim and Carol Cullen, Marion Currier, Martha Dupie, Louise Tremblay, Gwen Paquette, and Kevin Bowden. And we would like to thank the Town of Chelmsford Police Department. Liaisons with the police department this year were Lieutenant Jason Poore and Deputy Chief Colin Spence. And the department was so helpful to us. They assisted with traffic issues, road closures, permits, security, and as we all know with the sad happenings at another parade, we were so happy to have them. They kept us safe. So thank you to our department. They were wonderful. Thank you also to the Public Works Department. They helped with, of course, traffic issues, blocking roads. They also help us by hanging our banners on the light poles in the center, Drum Hill, Vinyl Square, and all kinds of other things they help with. So we truly appreciate all the work that they did. We couldn't do it without them. Also, thank you to the Chelmsford Fire Department. We had Deputy Chief Mike Donahue and Ryan Houle came to a couple of our meetings and helped us. As you know, we did a concert on Saturday night, and there were a few things that they had to help us with, so we truly appreciated that. a special thank you to our new committee member, Eric Lindstedt, who coordinated most of the concert on Saturday, and we did have quite a good crowd, and it seemed to be enjoyed by many. Finally, this parade could not have happened without our sponsors. The town does not give us any money to run the parade. We raise it all, and it runs $50,000 to $60,000, paying for bands and equipment and everything needed. So we truly appreciate our sponsors. This year we had 4 levels of sponsorship. The top one was the premium level, and that we had 2 sponsors, Blake Chelmsford Funeral Home and Enterprise Bank, and they've been longtime sponsors for us, and we truly appreciate everything they do for us. Our next sponsored level was the red sponsorship, which was Chelmsford Business Association, Dolan Funeral Home, Seasman All-State Insurance, and Lowell 5. And Seasman is a new business in town up at Drum Hill, and they were a sponsor for the first year, and I think they really enjoyed the day, and they were a big help to us. Our white sponsors were Lamakia Realty, Pride Star Trinity Ambulance, and Sterling Corporation. Pride Star Trinity has been a sponsor for many years, and Lamakia and Sterling were new sponsors this year, so it was great to see some new companies come out and help us out. And our final sponsorship level was blue sponsors, and we had Brian Boyle Electric, the C.A. Parley Farm in South Chelmsford, Chelmsford Lumber, Hannaford Supermarket, and Waddington North America. Brian Boyle was new this year, Chelmsford, Hannaford's, and Waddington. And again, we appreciate the new sponsorships. We're also talking about and looking into next year already, because we don't take too much time off and it starts again. And hopefully, next year, we'll be able to get some new additions to music. We felt as though we were a little bit short on musical groups, bands, but a lot of them, since COVID, have not regrouped, haven't been able to practice, so, we were unable to get too many of those. But I think that's all I have to say. Any questions or comments or suggestions for us for next year? We'd appreciate it.
Great job.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. It
Thank
was
you.
a great day.
Thank you. We have a great team, so everybody works well together, so we appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Take care.
Very good.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public input? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee vacancies. Ken?
Yes, so for committee vacancies for July 11th, 2022. First up, we have the Arts and Technology Education Fund. They're looking to fill 1 unexpired 3-year seat. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 1 unexpired 3-year term and 1 3-year term. Capital Planning Board Committee has 1 1-year term. The CCA Advisory Committee is looking for 1 person for a 1-year term. Clean Energy and Suitability Committee has 1 unexpired 3-year term and 1 3-year term. Commissions on Disabilities has 1 seat available, that's a 3-year term. Community Action Program Committee has 4 1-year terms. Community Preservation Fund Committee is looking to fill 1 3-year term. Council on Aging has 1 unexpired 3-year term, 2 3-year terms ending in June 30th of 25, and 5 associate member positions that are staggered at 3-year terms ending each June of each year. The Cultural Council has 2 unexpired 3-year terms, 1 3-year term. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 2 1-year terms. Parade Committee, all applicants are welcome. Those are 1-year terms expiring each July 31st each year. Permit Building Committee has 1 3-year term. Public Records Advisory Committee has 1 1-year term. The Recycling Committee has 1 1-year term, and Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee is looking to fill 1 1-year term. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application available on the town website. Or if you have more questions or want more information, you can contact the town manager's office at 50 Billerica Road, Chelmsford, Mass, or tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov for an email address. Again, that's tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov, or you can call the town manager's office at 978-250-5202.
Thank you, Ken. Next up, we have a continuation of the public hearing for Jala Enterprises doing business as Agmania. Is anyone here from Agmania? Okay. Does the board have any further questions with the updates that are in the packet? No? Is there any other public input? This is a public hearing. Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Aye. So, any discussion,
I don't think so. We already asked for that, no.
board?
All set. Congratulations.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
Well, no, we got to vote.
Well, hold on for a second. I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the application for wines and malt beverage license for Jala Enterprises doing business at Eggmania at 83 Parkhurst Road, Unit 15.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ken?
Aye.
Okay, we have 5-0. You're all set. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have the continuation of the transfer of stock and change of officers for Maramena, doing business as Jimmy's Pizza. Are there any questions from the board on the updates in the packet? No? This is a public hearing. Is there any additional public input? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a motion, Ken.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for a transfer of stock, change of officers, and change of manager, and change of hours on the wines and malt beverage license for Maramena Inc., doing business as Jimmy's Pizza at 2 Alpine Lane.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0. Thank you, you're all
Thank you very
set.
much. Good luck.
Okay, next up, we have a license application for change of seating for Dunkin' Donuts at 105 Chelmsford Street, and I see that someone from Dunkin' Donuts is in the Zoom room. Could you provide your name and address, please? And
Good evening, Emily Fitzgerald, 280 Merrimack Street, Methuen, Massachusetts.
Thank you. Would you mind turning your video on, or
Oh,
would you prefer
absolutely.
not to?
One moment. Go.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Do you want to just give us a summary of what you're doing with the change of seating?
Correct. So we are currently closed at 105 Chelmsford Street for a remodel of the Dunkin' Donuts, and we are hoping to increase the seating there from 33 seats to 37 seats upon reopening in the next few days.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board?
So you intend to be open and fairly soon?
Correct. We are hoping to be opening, with any luck, Tuesday of next week.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment to the seating floor plan on the common victual license for GL Donuts, doing business as Dunkin' Donuts at 105 Chelmsford Street, here in Chelmsford.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0. You're all set. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul, next up we have discussion items.
Yeah, kind of nervous, moving at a record pace here. First item, the board is regarding opera premium pay. As the board's aware, you've had requests in the past from various groups in the community for premium pay. Over time, we've looked at what other communities have done, including our neighboring communities in Westford and Berwick and so forth. And I think, I think the intent this evening is to have a discussion and hopefully bring a resolution to the premium pay issue.
Okay. Anybody like to offer anything?
Well, I think the last time we spoke about it, we talked about giving a certain amount of money, but then we discussed potentially just giving them a day off or 2 days, whatever. And if we gave the money, then somebody's gonna have to cover, and that would have been an additional cost, so I just say, why don't we just give every one of them like $1,000 or something like that, and, because it would have been like, what, $750 or whatever it was, Paul?
Yeah, depending on which groups are included or excluded,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or more, you know?
Yeah, we have hundreds
Yeah.
hundreds upon hundreds of municipal employees of different
No, but
categories.
I know, but you had a total figure or something, I think, it was like 55, I don't know, 55,000 or something like that? But that was,
I think that was to cover the
That-
premium pay if we gave a day off.
Right. Right, if we would, right, generally, if we gave a
To
day
replace,
off,
We don't-
we would generally replace in the 24-hour departments, which is, public safety dispatch, police, fire, everything else, we generally don't backfill,
Right. So that
Right,
was
so
the
the
actual
tra-
cost
the-
of doing the one day off.
Right. If you were to compensate every town employee, we would almost deplete our ARPA funds.
Be a big-
or-
big number.
talking about those people that we had discussed at the last meeting, I meant, like, the police, the fire, and I believe it was dispatchers. You know,
Okay.
That's
And
not.
I think there were concerns from some board members that, how do you choose? I'm going to let the people who said that speak. I don't.
I think where we landed the last time was more in the one day off for everybody, so that we don't have to pick and choose who gets it and who doesn't. And that's where Paul went off and did the analysis that comes back and told us it would cost about $55,000 in premium pay to backfill those positions that required it. And that felt like where we were heading.
That's kind of what I remember, is that, yeah, we were talking about
Yeah.
doing one day off and yeah, just backfilling those that needed to be backfilled, so that it wouldn't,
To recognize everyone.
right, everybody.
Yep.
Right. And I guess,
'Cause
I do have some questions about that. I mean, would that be full-time and part-time employees that would,
generally be benefit eligible employees is how we tend to do that.
okay, and I think we talked too about, they'd have to take it in this fiscal year.
In this fiscal year,
For the
yep.
end of this fiscal year.
But then you'd have to pay somebody to replace them on a day off, and that'd be
Not
time and a
everybody.
half, right?
Right.
Yeah, but not everybody.
That's the $55,000.
That would be for police, fire, and public safety dispatch.
Ken, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think you guys summarized our discussion that we had pretty well. It was, I agree, it was the discussion moved from picking and choosing and coming up with a dollar amount for the employees to just giving every benefit eligible employee a day off.
Right.
Although I was leaning more towards 2 days off, but I think that was a pretty good summary of the conversation. And just a side note, Mark, if you could just move closer to your mic, because you're not coming out too loudly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, and I am, I'm in favor of giving everyone a day off.
Yep, so am I.
And I know that the last time we looked at the ARPA funds, there was some concern about overrun on the HVAC and some of the other projects, and some caution from Darlene on not allocating, future projects right now. I will tell you, I did speak with her about the 55, 60K, and she did not see an issue with that, and thought that I supported this approach, so, for using the ARPA funds to cover the back pay. Okay,
We need a motion.
if there's no further discussion, is there any further discussion? Okay,
So still no interest in 2 days, right?
That's right.
So Virginia, are you looking for a motion tonight? Or?
I am, yes.
All right, so I'll make a motion to give every benefit eligible employee a paid day off as a thank you for the effort that went in during the COVID pandemic.
Second that. I'm not going to second it.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so it's 4 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you. Okay, Paul,
Yeah,
sewer flows?
First want to acknowledge our DPW Director, Christine Clancy, is here in the audience this evening for this and a few other topics regarding sewer and public works on Arise. But reporting to you as I have the monthly sewer flows, and obviously the June flow for last month were the last flow for the fiscal year 22. And I think you see the chart there on the screen. I think the thing to note is the fact that it's in the high 60s. You see a 69 was our flow, and the good news is once again we finished the fiscal year below our allocated sewer capacity of 2.66 million gallons per day. Here you've got, if you do the math divided by 365 and so forth. The whole issue of capacity is on a 12-month rolling basis, but I think the reason I want to point out to you is again, for a couple things. One is you look at June, the fact again that it's a dry month, I think really comes across in the data. You can see that was the only month of the last 12 where the numbers were in the 60s and not the 70s. The other thing, if you remember last July, and I'm getting to a point here, you see the flow was 85 over almost 86. And if you remember, last July was a rainy month. If you remember, there was a lot of showers. It rained around the parade period. There was, and I guess my point is this calendar year we were 6 inches thus far below normal rainfall, and so rainfall does matter in terms of our sewer flows and also the flows in other communities that service the treatment plant. Now we've done infiltration testing, which shows that we really aren't seeing an impact of infiltration in our sewer mains, and there may be a little bit in the covers and so forth, but nothing material. Why I'm belaboring this point is it would appear from the evidence that rainfall matters, and if the source of the inflow isn't from infiltration, then the other source from rainfall would be sump pumps that perhaps may be illegally discharging or improperly discharging into home sewer mains. That's a conclusion. I don't have evidence for that, but I think it's a reasonable conclusion what's going on, and it may be something, and Christine and I have talked about this may be something that if we're able to get grant funding as part of some of these environmental sustainability efforts in the future, that we may want to institute a program to assist homeowners in dealing with sump pumps, because the sewer lines are not the proper outlet for sump pumps, and there may be better ways to dispose of groundwater flow on personal private property as opposed to into the sewer system. But
How do you verify that?
you can verify with inspections, and there are some efforts that do that. The problem is you're really now getting into individual homes and scheduled inspections and so forth, and obviously if somebody were doing something improperly, you would have to, you could be a cat and mouse type of game. But I just want to point out to the fact that two things. One is we think, like most communities, that we may have an issue of sump pump infiltration into the sewer system, and second all is demonstrating that rainfall does have a matter on our flows, and third, that even with the dry month, we were still have significant flow during a rather dry last 6 months of the fiscal year, first 6 months of the calendar year, which again reaffirms our ongoing data that we go back for the last 4 or 5 years, that we're operating our sewer system at a near capacity. So again, if it had been a typical year, we'd have been sort of bumping up against our flow capacity. And I think the best way to look at that is if you look at that column on the bottom left where it says Chelmsford flow summaries, you can see that the 944 this year is greater than the 926 from last year, but about the flow we had in fiscal '20, and certainly not at the levels of fiscal '19 where you had our greatest flow, which was the rainiest year in Massachusetts record. So when you sort of look at it and say, gee, we've come out of COVID, in terms of more operations the last 6 months of this fiscal year, but yet our flows are running, solid where we were in fiscal '20, then again, it just indicates that, the evidence that we're continuing to see is that we're running, at or near our sewer permitted capacity of the 2.66 million gallons per day.
A different way to ask my question, Paul, I guess,
Yep.
is if you're seeing a correlation to the rainy season in terms of the sewer flows, so how do you know that it's not like groundwater getting into the sewer system?
Because when the camera work that we did over the last 6 months, where we prioritized what we thought were the high areas of infiltration, we just didn't come across those levels of inflow by actual cameraing the actual devices.
But that was a small subset of the
Right.
whole sewer system.
Right, but I think it's a reasonable sample, and it's also a sample of high probability. So yes, we can go and sample the remainder of the town's system, which we may be required to do at some point by DEP, but it just doesn't, and given the limited age of our system, it just doesn't appear that that's a major source of infiltration into our sewer flows, which is a good thing for the town. It's a little disappointing because we thought that might be, the investigation might be a source of obtaining additional sewer capacity. That hasn't panned out. So again, the data suggests that, that there may be an issue of sump pumps, and it's, again, maybe something we could look to in the future with the grant program to educate and also perhaps assist residents in utilizing sump pumps not into this town sewer system.
Has the new department helped, the new, Dennis Greenwood's group?
Well, that's stormwater. That's totally
Yeah.
separate. Our stormwater system's separate from our sewer system. So we're not
Some of that
having
water-
infiltration. Yeah, we don't have infiltration from stormwater, and into our sewer system.
Doesn't get, okay.
We don't have evidence that shows that that's a source, like you'd have in older communities where you'd have that type of issue. In some of our neighboring
Because
communities.
they did it with drainage, because of the drainage.
Exactly.
Because, but how does the rain affect it if it,
Well, again, and there could be there could be some pump issues on commercial properties as well. But what we're seeing is that, the weather has an impact. And again, in what's been a relatively dry year, you can still see that our levels are running at or about what they have been for the last couple of years. Which meant that if it was a normal rainfall year, we'd be above those levels, and closer to our permitted limit. And I think that's the bigger point.
And when we go over, do we get charged,
No, we don't incur fines or penalties, but that's because they'd have to have, what the contract with Lowell says, that if the treatment plant, the regional plant were to incur those penalties, then they'd be charged to Chelmsford. But thus far, that's not occurring. We've only exceeded our limit in 1 year, and that was fiscal year '19.
they get fined sometimes, though, right?
Well, yeah, but they've,
For different reasons.
we've not had it on flow. I mean, we know that the Lowell plant has operated over capacity twice in the last 4 fiscal years, but we've seen no action by DEP or any other regulatory agency regarding the overall plant.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item, the policy regarding sewer capacity and options for future solutions. Ken asked me to put this on the agenda, so Paul, unless you want to introduce it, I was going to ask Ken to introduce it. Or
I think it's sort of, I mean, Ken can jump in. I think it sort of just flows from this discussion is recognizing that we're at our, near our capacity for wastewater treatment. The question has arisen, well, what do we do now as we move forward without any immediate solutions on the horizon? And the way our system works is we have allocated capacity. And the DPW has actual data from sewer flows, and also we have the Title V state regulations that guide, sewer capacity. So what we're running into is if there's a development or a redevelopment taking place, the question becomes, how do we accommodate that? And is there a means to accommodate that when there is a system where we're up against capacity? And so I think the discussion and consideration is there a means of which we could reassign or transfer that capacity in the system in order to accommodate development or redevelopment in the commercial areas or targeted areas in the community? And the question is how would that go about working in terms of making that possible? Because otherwise, and you're going to have a situation where some because of land constraints and environmental constraints, there'd be some development or redevelopment that's not going to be permissible because there's no on-site premises of which to expand or install a conventional septic system. And we have one of those right now before the planning board, where there's a redevelopment proposed off Apollo Drive where they're looking to expand the commercial building, and they're looking to install a very small septic system there to accommodate that expansion. Well, there are other instances where they may not have that capacity, and so what do we do in those instances? And is there a way that you'd almost have a commodity market where if somebody would either assign or remove themselves from the treatment system, then can that allocation be net zero to the overall flow of the system, given that we're up against it? And I think an example would be, suppose somebody was on a home with a grinder pump and was willing to be removed from the system and install a septic on their property, then could you then have that commodity, transferred to another sewer user who needs expanded capacity for, development or redevelopment purposes? So I think that's sort of a general overview. I don't know, Ken, if I did justice to it. And again, we have Christine here this evening and others, and Mark and others who can probably assist with the discussion that was had.
Yeah, I think it was just more, we were coming up on 2 years of a moratorium, and I think we need to address whether it's going to stay a moratorium or turn into some sort of a policy going forward. Because I think moratorium implies it might change at some point. And I think we need to come up with something more permanent for people who are developers and businesses that are looking to come into the town. So I think that's what started that conversation. But I think the rest of it probably did a pretty good job summarizing the different options. We're trying to, think outside the box with different ways we could build a cushion or a bank, and then, figure out a way to allocate that so that there's a policy for it. So it's not done in an ad hoc basis, but more formally with a purpose for the town.
So, Mark, you were also at this
Yep.
discussion. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so coming back to the ideas that were kicked around, which you did summarize, is there a plan to move this thing forward, to look at some of those options, to maybe, we talked about getting legal counsel involved to find out how that policy might be able to be written in such a way that it would be, a fair policy if actually banking capacity made sense, or privately doing that made sense, and how would we do that? So, as you know, there's a property downtown that is, just was acquired and is definitely, for me, it's definitely a triggering event that says we need to move this quicker than probably what we were doing before if we want to try to help accommodate that development. So I'm kind of looking for, what's the plan, timeline, how do we meet? How do we, try to move this thing forward to find out where we could end up?
And, we've asked Christine, and Christine's here, to start looking at other communities who may be in a similar situation as Chelmsford in terms of, at their capacity limit, and what do they do? The other option is there a nearby property, but that's not often the case either in terms of, that you could physically connect to from the system. And so I think, we really wanted to air it to the full board to get your thoughts in terms of, whether you'd be supportive of that notion, or do we just say, we're very similar to the town of Westford. Our capacity is our capacity, and, if you can't meet a Title V or wastewater treatment plant system, then that's the constraint. So it's either this type of a commodity system, or we just say, no, we have a hard allocation system, and that's it. And unless you can, develop on-site capacity or immediate adjacent capacity. For example, there was a subdivision, and we've seen a couple subdivisions where they had allocated capacity of a couple of sewer connections from the allocation. And the question became we've generally informed them that if you're doing a subdivision, we as a town aren't concerned what two properties in that subdivision would connect. But then the bigger question is, okay, well, what about if none of them connect? If you have good soils, then can you use that as a commodity? Or is it just a hard cap saying no, when there's no such exchange? And I think that's really the choice that we have. And again, we're up against it. And yes, we know that we have vacancies, but we think we'll always have some level of vacancy in commercial and other property. And now, again, given where we are, in the last couple of years, where, we're seeing a consistency of even with the weather, as I noted about our flows, that we're up against it. And as Select Board Member LaFave noted, our moratorium expires the end of October, which is just over 3 months away. And I really think it's a point where we really got to stop calling it a moratorium and just calling it a sewer policy. And so I think our intent is to come back and prepare that work and research, if that's sort of a direction that we're looking for your input in terms of, is that a direction that we want to go in terms of either having what I call a hard policy in terms of your allocated policy is your allocated policy, or do we want to allow, and I think the most effective way to do it would be a private exchange, meaning the town's not going to be the one buying and trading, sewer capacity. That would be between private property owners. Obviously, there'd have to be some recording of deeds and restrictions and other things, so that if somebody did give up that right, it would have to be recorded to the deed so that it's recognized and known. What's happening now is, DPW is examining every development that comes in terms of allocated capacity and what's allowed. And in some cases, it works the other way. I mean, there's a proposal to convert a office building on Billerica Road to more of a warehouse use, which would use less capacity. Now, one way of looking at it, you could just say, oh, that's fine, that'll give us more of a cushion in terms of the uncertainty of flows. Or you could say, no, if that's what that property owner does, then can they, based upon either their historic usage, can they then, be allowed to exchange that commodity, and the fact that they're going to a less restrictive use to another parcel that may be going to a greater proposed use.
Well, the buildings now that are currently vacant, they have an allocation.
Yep.
So that allocation must be being used someplace else?
Well, right now, it's not being
Well,
used, but, and we're below our ceiling, but you're right, if all those buildings were to be occupied, we'd be above our capacity. I think that's fair to say, but we don't see you'll ever be at that state. There's always a natural vacancy in the commercial market, even in a healthy market, of about 5%.
Is there any possible way we could do something with one of the surrounding, like a Westford or a Tingsboro? Or, I know we've tried something with Billerica, right, to use.
Billerica declined. I mean, they were approached, Billerica declined. Lowell just doesn't, the plant in Lowell just doesn't have the capacity to expand at this point in time, in terms of either permitted capacity or practical, given that they're dealing with storm surge overflow, so that's not happening either. And, I just am not sensing any interest from the other communities. In terms, what you are seeing, and you may see, is what happened at UMass West Campus. Is if somebody has the real estate, then they're putting in a package treatment plant, which is, for example, what's going on in Westford right now. They're converting a tennis club into a housing development. Well, they're going to have an on-site system because they don't have sewerage.
You're gonna need powerhouse-type developers, though, if you really want to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, money-wise.
And the difficulty in terms of trying to go that next step of a treatment plant is, where do you place it? And we know that today's federal and state environmental regulations would not allow, for example, a treatment plant that discharges into the river. And therefore, Southwell is sort of ruled out. The other problem with Southwell is it's right across from the intake of the whole water works. And so, there's no possibility you'd get a treatment plant. And then the other question is, if you look at that list from the report that was developed last September, there weren't many attractive sites on that list that could host a treatment plant in Chelmsford. The number one list was West Campus, the 255 Princeton Street. Well, obviously that's off the table. And then there were a bunch of others that weren't eligible. And the other problem is where do you cite this? I think the next site was Jordan Ave or something, and that's right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I just don't think that's achievable politically or practically when you look at the issues that accompany a wastewater treatment plant, such as odor, noise, traffic, and so forth. So I think, absent this, we're sort of at where we are.
What are the questions that we have that we would want considered by council or in general in this trade study that's going to be done on path forward?
Well, for me, I mean, what we discussed was, for instance, the Apollo Drive property. They're already going in to do some expansion, and they have to put in treatment there. And my thought was, is that something you could approach them in some fashion, give them credits or whatever, if they were to expand that to take over their entire capacity and do treatment on site and then get that capacity back. That's be one example.
And
Another
excuse me,
example.
Mark, in that's an example that where the town would be managing the capacity and it wouldn't be handled by private exchange like Paul had suggested.
Correct.
So there's, okay, so
Yeah,
that's,
so that's
okay.
one idea, okay? Another idea is that same approach where if somebody is putting in septic, that they put it in such a way that may also be, it could be available to abutters.
Right.
That might be able to tie into that, either for expansion or for their existing capacity, where we again could pull capacity back into the inventory, if you will, for the town.
Give them a few tax credits.
Yeah, whatever the appropriate incentives would be to do that, and tax credits is obviously a good one. So it's to explore those kinds of opportunities. Also, is there an opportunity for private exchange between, private entities to do that? If we do go from an office base to a warehouse base, usage, could we also then pull that capacity into our inventory, again, to be able to allocate that elsewhere? And as far as the inventory goes and the allocation, the thought is that if a board or some such entity could be the governing authority that could allocate that based on hardship, and the hardship could be topography, location, et cetera, where they can't expand in place. There is no place for them to do treatment. They do want to expand on site. Everything else is acceptable. They just have nowhere to go with their discharge. And maybe there's some language around that might be appropriate, rather than it just being zoning. Maybe it's more of a hardship situation. So those are just some ideas that we threw around.
Well, I'll throw another question.
Yeah.
To piggyback on that, my question would be, one, can we do policy? And I think legal has to help us with that. But two, who owns it?
Right.
I mean, we're not sewer experts, so
No.
who owns that policy?
Well, right now, the policy is owned by DPW. The
Right.
charter provided that when the sewer commission dissolved, all those authority and responsibilities went to DPW.
Okay.
And that was why the moratorium was imposed by DPW, not by the select board.
Right.
Any other questions that come to mind just thinking about this topic?
Well, I mean, those were just some ideas. I'm sure there's 10 more good ones. But, rather than just saying no, we have to start being in the business of finding out how we can accommodate business development and other development within our town. Otherwise, people they're just not going to come here. It's going to be it.
Right.
And we need more than that. And it doesn't have to be the floodgates open, no pun intended, but it should be such that there are specific examples that we can make accommodations for in order to, again, to maybe achieve what we're trying to do in the master plan in our vision for this town.
Well, it's apparent, that you guys have met about this and talked about it quite a bit. That's why I was a little disappointed to see on our agenda that we had, 6 words about it. I wish I had known some of these discussions to kind of give it some thought to it.
Pat, if I may,
We had
there
one
was
meeting.
a meeting
A
that
meeting.
that Ken and Mark and Paul and Christine had.
And Evan, yeah.
And after that meeting, Ken came to me and said, this needs to come in front of the board. So I'm not going to fault them for that. They had a question, they had a discussion, and here it is in front of the board. And this is our opportunity to get the details from it. And I think so far, that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, if I could just finish then, but that was my
Okay.
first thing, because, we could have gotten more than six words, because apparently, Mark, you have some good ideas there. It would be good to see those in a written form, and,
Well, those were given to the folks that can put it into a written form, and then they can expand on it and try to actually put some policy and seek attorneys
okay.
to
and-
help them
and
with
if I
that
could-
policy.
And if I could finish, now. There are some things that need to be addressed, and some businesses that have come have addressed them, as the UMass West Campus has, and other developments that are potentially proposed. I understand that there are some locations that's not practical, so maybe there needs to be some kind of way for them to have some ability to tie into the sewer. I guess I just don't want to see it turned into a Wild West auction where they're going around to different businesses around town that have enough land to put in their own sewer system and then be able to.
This is where people come off the sewer
Exactly.
intentionally to trade.
Yeah, right. That to me would be, I don't know, that would be the next cryptocurrency, would be sewer capacity. So anyway, just my general thoughts on it, just.
We are gonna need it for tax revenue and things like that, if we're gonna build, especially if we can put it to commercial use, you know what I mean?
So, yeah, if I just could understand your comment, if we start to develop, or if Paul and his staff start to develop options for a policy, you would want to see what are the options to sort of safeguard the Wild West syndrome from happening.
For sure.
Yep, that's fine.
That's,
If somebody's going to make generate revenue from this, it should be the town and not somebody who
Right.
now has access to sewer capacity and has other options themselves that they can then trade it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a big proponent of the private exchange program, but it's an option. It's something to look at, that's all. We should keep all options on the table.
Are
Bring
there-
them out.
Are there policies, similar policies or anything that you've found so far? Do other municipalities implement? Thank you, Christine.
Good evening. So we did meet just last week, and I have been asking around, and we cannot find a similar situation. I think a lot of towns, they go to septic. But I do think we will continue to search. It actually might be worthwhile having a conversation with the DEP or EPA to see if they have some examples. I know we have an upcoming meeting with DEP for for the inflow, so that might be a good opportunity. So I'll continue to reach out to communities, but just as a quick glance, I could not find something. I know the Cape has problems. But they're septic, but I guess I have to look further to see if they do septic for multiple users. So we're still investigating it, but at first look quickly, I just looked end of last week and today, and I asked around too, and we did not have a community that just reminded us of the situation we're dealing with right now.
So I guess the next question I would have is, let's maybe just sanity check this with council to make sure there's not a legal reason why we can't find a community that has a policy. Whether it's even something we can
Was the
do.
recommendation during that meeting to do
Yeah.
it quickly,
Right.
to find out what we can do. Because, by the way, down the Cape, it is prevalent, HOA-type sewer systems because of the sewer issues that they have down there. So they put it in the best location, and they tie multiple dwellings to it. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's the right thing for us, but it could be the right thing for some of our commercial side.
At one time, you couldn't share, could you, the septic system with another,
Right.
right, it had to be directly just for the,
Right.
so.
Right.
But
But
sometimes things have to change just to make things happen, I guess.
So is there,
Can I just,
yep,
I just wanted to just get back to Pat's first comment, and I didn't want anybody to feel left out. This really just started as I had reached out to Paul because of the 2-year anniversary on the moratorium in the project in the center of town to say, I had a couple ideas and we probably should make it a policy. And I don't remember where I ran into Mark, but I just had said to him I was going to meet with Paul on this, and he said, I was reaching out to Paul to do the same, and out of just convenience of time, I think Mark was in town hall, and he just jumped in on my meeting. And it wasn't really a long meeting, but as soon as that meeting ended, I think I was in the parking lot when I called you and said, this has got to be a board full discussion. I think there were some great ideas, and before it goes any further, I want to be in front of the whole board on it. So I didn't want it to seem like, we had formed a ad hoc committee and we're, doing a ton of work on this as of yet. We really had just gotten sort of started, and that's when I said this should really be an entire board discussion.
Ken, when you made that call, you also mentioned something about public input or hearing. What was that comment? Is that relevant to this discussion here, or?
I'm not really sure. Maybe down the road, we had, it's like we said, it's 2 years. We've had a lot of, I've had a lot of calls from different projects in town wanting to talk to me about how it's gone with trying to put in private septic on some of these residential developments and some of the commercial spots. And I didn't know if maybe we wanted to hear from residents and or business owners or property owners in town on what they've been through in the last 2 years, or why we really need to get some type of a policy in place and find even small solutions along the way to get us some, even if it's be it small steps towards a bank of capacity. Just otherwise the town's just not going to go anywhere.
Would it make sense
as
to
far
do
as development goes.
would it make sense to do a little bit of homework on some of these questions in the trade space first to know what we're
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
public
yeah.
input on? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess, Paul, my question would be, what's a reasonable time frame to, I'm not saying come back with a full policy or a full recommendation, but just like an interim, here's what we've looked into, here's what we found out, here's what council's advice was. Because I don't know about the rest of the board. I don't want to wind up in October saying, okay, we're at the end of the moratorium, here's our recommendation. I think this would benefit by just having an interactive discussion between now and October.
No, I would agree, and I mean, hopefully we'll have something within the next few weeks, and certainly by next month to, come back and say, hey, look, this is what we're finding, and these are some of the pitfalls.
Yeah, I mean, it
some of
doesn't,
these-
and even
these are
if everything's not
periodic updates.
answered yet, at
Right.
least, so like in about a month, the end of August, we come back and say, okay, or middle of August, we say, this is what we found so far.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah, because we also talked about you getting a chance to really look through all the flow data and all the II data, and then by station, by, the
Right.
different climate
Right.
conditions that were in place during those times, to see if there is any opportunity to isolate there, too.
Is it possible that some people have a more allocation than they needed, originally were, had a big allocation and they never had,
We see that on some commercial properties where
That's
if
what I
you
mean.
look at the Title V versus their actual flows, they're below
Yeah.
their Title V limits, which is, I guess, fortunate in terms of our flow data. And so, yeah, we're seeing that. And again, we'll come back with that. But again, you can't use that as a benchmark, because if you did, we'd be well over capacity. And I think that was sort of in the back of I'll just speak to myself, in my mind, is sort of like, we're at a place right now where the moratorium is not affecting residential property owners. Somebody can add an in-law apartment, a bedroom, and so forth. You're not at what I'd call a hard cap situation. And I think concern and why we were sort of gearing towards a permanent sewer policy was sort of like to maintain that status quo that is operational. And then also in the back of my mind was, there is this sentiment out there in the community that's sort of, we've had enough growth, and we don't want to further, increase the population and increase the traffic and everything else in the community, and that we can't ignore that exists out there as well. So, again, another reason why, before we, went too far, we wanted to come before the board and say, geez, what are your thoughts in terms of, is this something worth pursuing? Because it is going to take some time and resources, as was noted, in terms of legal, regulatory, and other investigations to see if, again, if this is something that is attainable without, causing greater problems to the community down the road.
Paul, you just said something I didn't understand. A resident can add a bedroom or add a in-law apartment right now? I thought that your allocation was based on number of bedrooms.
It is, but there is in our moratorium, there was the flexibility was it a couple hundred gallons of?
Oh, I'm
So
sorry,
is-
I forgot.
So essentially, you can add an in-law, a bedroom, really if there's flows that are added, so that the cap is below 500 gallons per day. So
thank
that,
you.
I guess that is allowed in the current moratorium, and so that is something, and we do see that often, people doing additions.
Yeah.
We've even had, like pool houses someone came in the other day to talk about a pool house, and they want to put it in a bathroom, and so that, has some allocation to it. We'd have to look at Title V to see exactly what it is, but that is allowed right now. We've even had some commercial come with and it would technically be a change in use, but it was such a minimal or incremental change in use. And that would also be allowed as long as that was an incremental, we're talking under that 500 gallons per day. So that is allowed under the current, and so that's, I think, also part of while looking at this is that we are just the numbers. I think it was 944 for the flows, and if you do the math, 2.66 gallons per day times 365, here it's 971. We're within 3% of our capacity, or within like 3% this year. We were over in previous years, so there's no wiggle room there, and we had below average rainfall. So understanding there's vacancies out there, that is going to naturally happen, and the ability to continue to allow residential and some minimal incremental commercial to make those changes, that is allowed in the sewer moratorium. I think in terms of the timeline, we were thinking that within the next month to have that draft, and I do think that the goal that I think we have is to not call this a moratorium, to call this really part of a policy, and it would be part of the sewer regulation policy. That would be something that we'll be working on in the next month and have that draft. And I do imagine that over time, I mean, who's to say that in 6 months or in a year we might have amendments to that policy, but at least bringing it to a place where it's not a moratorium and we have addressed hopefully some of these issues.
Just one thing I wanted to say about what you said, Paul, and I think there is an appetite with a lot of folks that think that we've developed enough. But there also should be an appetite for hardships. And if there's clearly a hardship where somebody's trying to do something that is clearly to improve the town, and in this case, I'm thinking about the downtown, it's just a great example, that we should have the ability to be able to accommodate that if we can find a way to maybe create some buffer, create some inventory, if you will. And I think the inventory that we should be trying to create is a buffer, because we could use more. But there should still be some kind of provision for hardship, where somebody's clearly trying to do something that if you put it to a vote, it would probably be 90%, that we would be able to find a way to allocate some capacity to those particular programs or developments.
As long as it's legally defensible. And that's where we'll
Well,
use
that's
counsel.
why the
because
first thing we
that's the
said
issue.
was
One person's
get an
hardship is
attorney.
another person's discretion, and
That's why we said
that's why
to
we
get
have
an
counsel.
attorney.
Exactly, because
To help,
we don't want to put the town in a situation
Well,
where,
Yeah, that's
we don't
probably
want to
step
wait till
one.
yeah.
we don't want to wait till
I'm
next year to do
serious.
that.
No,
We need
don't
to
wanna
do
go-
that sooner than
You don't want
later.
to go through all this effort if it's not even
Exactly.
something we can legally do,
Exactly.
so that's
Exactly.
step one.
That's our step, that's our first step,
That's your
Yep.
first action.
right,
Do we have anybody in mind yet?
in terms of counsel.
Yep.
Well, first, we're going to start with
Start with
town,
Paul
we're going
Haverty.
to start with town
Well,
council
yeah,
for,
that's
for
not
a
what you
refer-
recommend.
for a referral,
Yeah.
and that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we'll do.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think it's a great discussion, and we could,
Yep.
we could all think about it, and hopefully we'll come to some kind of a resolution.
Okay, Paul, next we have bid awards.
Yeah, I just have one item for a bid award this evening. This has to do with the Parker School wheelchair lift. This was a FY '21 capital project. This is to replace the existing lift at the Parker School. The DPW bid that project. They received one bid from Neeland Construction, the amount of $158,000, and we're seeking the board's confirmation of this bid award as presented. And yeah, I know it's disappointing to find one elevator bid, but that's, unfortunately, it's not uncommon in this market and in the last couple of years. I remember even when we did the fire station next door, there was one bidder on the fire station bid, and it's just showing you how tight the market is.
Where did we post the bid, the RFP? Did
It went out to
Did it go out on Combis?
Went on Combis. It was legally advertised. Yeah, and we also know vendors that we reach out to who've done elevator work in the past. And we got one bid. I think there were 3 bidders at the pre-bid conference, but there was one bid submitted.
And what's Weston and Sampson's role?
On this one, I don't think they had any role.
It says they were at the bid opening.
They were at the bid opening, but they're not a bidder or a bid construction manager or anything else. They sort of help the town provide the specifications for the
Oh,
project.
okay.
And what was the budget? for
The
this?
budget was 127, which shows, one, again, the tightness of the market. The other problem that we're dealing with is delivery date. The goal was to have this installed prior to the commencement of the school year, and it looks like we may not be able to get delivery of the actual elevator itself, until the lift itself, until October. So we've got outreach to the superintendent, who Christine and I and Kathleen meet with the superintendent and his facilities person on a monthly basis to go through all these projects. And so we reach out to them to find out, if it's going to pose a hardship to not have that lift elevator available for the first 3 months of the school year at the Parker School.
And you can cover the 31K?
Yes, we're working on that.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid for the replacement of the Parker School wheelchair lift to Neeland Construction in the amount of $158,000.
Second motion.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul?
All right, 3 items on my report this evening. The first one is the fourth quarterly update on the Select Board and Town Manager's goals for fiscal year '22. I have the PowerPoint that I presented to you in the packet. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I'll just sort of highlight the different areas, and this is an update from the previous update earlier this calendar year. The first goal was sewer capacity in terms of addressing the sewer capacity, and as we noted in our early discussion, that study was completed back in September, and as we discussed, we did contract to have the inflow and infiltration investigations in those areas that we thought would yield expanded capacity, and as we heard from Weston and Sampson last month, we actually found sort of an opposite unfortunate concern where there appears to be excessive flow in the Littleton Road line, and that's being investigated now for options, and they'll come back in a couple of months. But really,
So-
we found no significant areas of inflow and infiltration that, as part of the cammering work that was done in the nighttime hours of this 98,000 linear feet of area. Go ahead.
I just had a question about the statement you just read.
Yeah.
So the Littleton Road, it's not a crisis, but it's not insignificant.
No, it's not insignificant, right. What I'm
okay.
saying is we didn't find significant areas of additional capacity. What we thought may be occurring was there could have been, disconnected pipes, errors of construction where caps weren't put on and so forth that would be leading to infiltration of groundwater or, stormwater
Failures.
coming into the system. And in fact, we didn't find that. What we found was the opposite. The area that we thought was a high potential because the flow was high turned out to be flow, not infiltration, but actual sewer flow, and that was the Littleton Road corridor. So we sort of went from targeting an area that we thought we could pick up capacity to an area which we may have to address in terms of some type of a relief to the sewer main, which, again, we'll come back with in a couple months when that investigation is completed in terms of, what is the source of that and what are the options. We've just, have not gotten any breaks in terms of coming across additional capacity. And as the report noted, we reached out, and was discussed earlier, we reached out to Barica and other towns. We're monitoring our flows, documenting and reporting in terms of what's happening out there, and every project that comes in is being analyzed for existing and potential flows. So that's sort of where we are in terms of the capacity issues on the sewer capacity goal. In terms of the lessons learned, it sort of relates to that is, as we, in the initial update, we looked into the root causes in terms of discussions with community development, public works, and other town staff that's involved in this. And what we've instituted in terms of this is there's a detailed DPW checklist where, for projects, where all development is analyzed in terms of, sewer capacity, sewer flows. And then on top of that, in terms of not only assuring that work is being done, we're also having weekly meetings of the core people in development, in terms of the community development director, board of health director, public works director, town engineer, and others, to basically make sure that we're on top of anything that's going on out there. And those meetings generally run about an hour, and I think they've been very productive in terms of making sure that everybody's up to date on what's happening in terms of almost a real-time basis of in this case, sewer development in the community, but it also goes to issues of traffic safety and other activity inside the community in terms of, what's going on. And it could be something as simple as, preparing for the parade, to something more complex such as, what's going on with that development, on X Street in terms of, what are they looking to do? What's the indication of permitting and Title V issues and so forth. And then also that, we talked about this the last time we talked about it, we did look into our other utilities in terms of, and you may recall, we connected with National Grid and so forth, and we're not aware of any other similar issues in terms of electricity capacity, natural gas capacity, And, and the other utility was water. And, I think, like I said, I think we're in good shape in terms of the communication levels and the analysis that's taking place in terms of
Okay.
moving forward. The next goal was the Warren Pole Farm. We're nearing, the end of the preservation process in terms of the documentation process. That required perimeter surveying by DPW. The Conservation Commission worked with the DPW, and we expect work to take place in the next few weeks in terms of the access off of Boston Road and parking area on that. The environmental permitting has all been completed, and that work will be scheduled. And we also went to town meeting and did the easement plans for the abutters on Parker Road and Hall Road that were impacted by the town's acquisition, and we're finalizing some final survey and plan results on Parker Road, and then we'll bring them to the board for approval as authorized by town meeting. And as I mentioned at the outset, I checked with David Kuntz again today, and he thinks we're just on the doorstep of getting the finalization of the conservation restriction, and then all the mapping and everything will come together and bring this to closure in terms of, public access into the property. Fire stations, I'll be brief on this. The board established criteria early on in the year. You appointed a committee. The committee, immediately got together and has met twice a month. Their first task was developing a mission statement, and then based on that mission statement, we've done the items that are listed there in terms of assessing the condition of the existing fire stations. We went out and toured all the existing stations. We're continuing to analyze response times under our current configuration, and maybe there's some variability in terms of, how that would be altered in the event that, different station configurations. And discussions have been ongoing, with many scenarios and sub-scenarios in terms of apparatus requirements, staffing requirements, but underneath it all, looking at the safety needs of the community and the safety needs of the responding firefighters. So I think, in the next near future, you'll see report and recommendations from the committee in terms of, addressing this very important issue for the community.
Okay.
On PFAS and Richardson Road, again, things are on track. The plan was filed back in October and accepted by the DEP. The initial stage 1 site investigation report was also completed timely in December. The quarterly sampling of PFAS has been ongoing, and we've had the reports here from Paul McKinley, our licensed site professional consulting engineer from Weston and Sampson. And then as of last week, the treatment system began operation, and the next round of sampling is scheduled for next month of the quarterly results, which means if it's taken in August, we'll get it in September. But we really may not see the results of that treatment system operation probably for a few quarters in terms of trying to draw some conclusions. But the bottom line is, we've been on top of this goal, meeting the state regulatory requirements, and also I think, coordinating, communicating with the water district. North Chelmsford Water District obviously is concerned by their well field.
Paul, how
Yeah.
far does our current funding get us on this?
It gets us into, we had funding, I think it gets us into the fall or winter. We may be looking at coming back to fall town meeting for ongoing funding if other, or exploring other funding sources, whether it's state funding or ARPA funding in terms of the ongoing treatment and operation. I mean, we're done the construction, but it does cost to do the quarterly monitoring. It's cost to run the system, and as well as any other work that arises during that time. But I mean, the good part is the investigation stage is complete, and the treatment system is complete. Now we're operating and analyzing and gathering data. And speaking of that ARPA funding, we talked about it earlier tonight in an earlier agenda matter, but when the availability of the funding came and the two distributions of funding, we made the community aware of the process in terms of ARPA funding and conducted outreach. I work with the department heads to address what we thought were the salient issues in the community, most notably COVID-related in terms of air quality, mental health and public health impacts in terms of from the pandemic. And then also, the plan also considered some ancillary issues that were needed in the community, such as funding for sewer pump stations and a fire rescue vehicle. You approved the latest modifications to that plan back in January, which is about not quite 6 months ago at this point in time. And in that time, we worked, as I mentioned, the team that is meeting monthly to review the status of funding, and and there's an allocation for every project, not only ARPA funding, but also capital projects in terms of who's the primary lead for the project, where are we at in terms of bidding, funding, and so forth on those projects. And again, our priority and initial focus has been in the schools. One is because that's where the children are in terms of air quality and so forth, but also there's some work in the schools, such as playground work and work inside the schools that's best done during the summer months. And I think we're at a good place. As I mentioned, when we were considering this, we need to have the funds committed by December of 2024 and expended by December of 2026. We believe that this workload that we have is with the existing staff has placed additional stress on our personnel, in addition to also doing some additional road funding projects that we're doing. And I think I'd ask the board, not for a decision tonight, but for some consideration, is that if it may be worth considering that if we want to develop these bids and bid these projects more, that perhaps an allocation of ARPA funding to have that additional person or resource to assist our existing staff, because this is a workload.
Like an outside contractor?
Yeah, an
help us
outside
with the
contractor,
procurement
or the other thing would be even an employee who could be part of a succession planning, i.e. not looking to add an employee base, but there could be a situation where if we were to bring an employee in at a high level, that there could be something that perhaps that person could transition into the town upon the retirement of another employee. And so that may be worth considering as well. It also would help address succession planning in facilities. So again, not looking for an answer this evening, but I just want to put that idea out to the board to give it some consideration, that it would achieve its two goals. It would help us to further bid and get out under projects, and also it would also perhaps help us with succession planning in the facilities area.
I think the other thing that you and the board that we should consider is the frequency with which we're going to look at like progress or status reporting on these projects. So we went like 6 months before we took the first look.
Yep.
And you're meeting monthly, so is it like the traffic where we do a quick status update so we're all on the same sheet every month, with financial statusing quarterly, or what's the cadence? Because I'm concerned about 6-month intervals or yearly intervals, even because of the timeline that we have to commit and expend the funds.
Let me know your preference, if you want monthly or
I just-
quarterly, or let me know what you prefer.
I don't know what makes sense.
I mean,
Because we're doing it monthly. Yeah.
Just do it monthly till we know.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
All right, thanks. Okay. The next one was COVID reoccurrence preparation, and fortunately, this is one that we haven't had to utilize because we're sort of in a different COVID thing than we were 6 months ago, and certainly where we were a year ago, but everything is in place. The Board of Health has an emergency plan in place to address any kind of a resurgence or uptick or vaccination demand that may arise. Again, it's really going to be the call of the state. And, you know, we believe we were prepared the last time, and we acted the last time, but then the state went with a different private model. But anyway, I want to assure the board that, you know, we have the plans in place that we can dispense, you know, boosters or what have you that's needed. We're also well-stocked and prepared for PPE. You may have seen in recent months, we were distributing free test kits and so forth, but we have all the materials and availability on-site, you know, in the event that there's a return, because clearly with school coming back and we start heading back into the winter months, it's going to be interesting to see what variants are, and many of it probably can't be foreseen at this time, much like what we saw a year ago at this time didn't fully transpire. And as I mentioned earlier, we do meet weekly with the public health director and the key stakeholders in emergency response to address what's going on with the COVID market. Right now, it's waning. You know, the state, as you may have read, is sort of reduced their own reporting now, you know, the frequency of their own reporting. But we're at the helm, and again, you know, we're undertaking those projects such as the McKay Library and others that can address the issues of gathering places in terms of schools, library, and other public facilities. Resident communication, you know, again, recognizing where we are in the world of 2022, where since this goal was achieved, we lost the publication of a weekly newspaper in town, which is now only online only. So towards that, I've established a monthly newsletter incorporating the suggestions from the board in terms of how do we get more information out to residents. I think it's been helpful. I'm getting a lot of good cooperation from internal in terms of getting the information out from departments. We make it available on our website. We push it out through social media. We have print copies. I was downstairs today and by the tax window where people are coming in for their payments. There's print copies of the report there. You know, what we really can't do is we don't have the means to physically distribute it to every, you know, household or whatever in the community, because those, especially now with postage, keep going up as it did today in terms of how to get that information out. But we're using the methodology that we can that's within the realm of cost considerations. We also are finding a lot of success with the news flashes on the town's website that, again, not only get put on the website, they get pushed out to Facebook and Twitter. I think the best example of it is the police department. They really have got this down to a science in terms of letting people know of issues of immediacy and so forth, that of what's happening in the community. But also we're mindful of, you know, for example, if there is going to be a change by the water districts of the water ban, then, you know, we'll immediately pump that out to help them get word and information out into the community. And also, we are monitoring social media websites, not to be an engaged participant, but it does become a point where sometimes it's helpful if a town official, whether it's a community development director or I or others, sort of step in and say, well, no, this is something that, we're not going to get into a debate, we're not here, but, you know, here's something that, you know, to make the record clear, this is something that actually happened, or this is something that did transpire, to hopefully correct some misinformation that's out there. I know that's a fine line, but we're trying to, you know, walk it. And then also we continue to use telemedia in terms of programming to get information out there and promote. I think Lisa's done a great job in terms of the business openings and ribbon cuttings, utilizing telemedia, which also goes to social media to promote, you know, those type of activities as well as civic events. The minutes policy, I mean, that's a board goal, and I know you achieved it because I sat and witnessed it, but you did earlier in the year, you know, define the select board's minutes policy, and you know, and I am doing reviews to the best that I can to achieve compliance with the availability of meeting minutes and concerns, and I think overall it's been good. And I mean, in terms of, you know, we're really working to make sure that information is available, and then sometimes things just get lost, but we are monitoring and trying to stay on top of it. And we're also looking to see what changes the legislature may do to the meeting minutes process, if any, as they wrap up the session in the next couple of weeks. We know there was a concern about hybrid meetings and how that'll be extended and in what manner and form. And we're also looking to see if they'll make any tweaks in terms of meeting minutes or other requirements. The next goal is the public works infrastructure. Again, if you go back to last October, you had the 2 listening sessions at the senior center and the center school. From that, the items that were raised were taken on by the Traffic Safety Committee, and then we also took on other issues that arose, whether it was by direct contact or through you or otherwise, that arose during the course of the fiscal year. Coming back to the actual prioritized plan for road infrastructure improvements, the pavement management assessment was completed last December. The plan was presented to this board in this room back in early 2022 in terms of roadway, 5-year plan for roadway and sidewalk improvements. And then last week, we sort of did a spot check with Christine, who's come on board since that time, and the plan's being followed. I think that's the best way to describe it in terms of what was said to be on the first year of the plan is what's taking place out there. And we also recognize that as time moves on, the plan is not written in stone, and that, as conditions change, we may have to modify the plan over time. But the other thing is the money was secured from town meeting to deal with additional roadway improvements, and maybe something we may look to do at fall town meeting once Darlene closes the books as town accountant, and if there's cash available, because I know it's well received and well needed, because the legislature didn't act to improve the Chapter 90 funding, despite all the state surpluses it had and is doing. They didn't. They maintained again the same $200 million statewide for Chapter 90 funding, which, as we know, with this inflationary environment, is doing less and less. And then the other big issue was the DEP consent order for the sewer inflow and infiltration plan. We met all the requirements of that in terms of the Southwell spill, the infiltration plan, updated the emergency response plan, the progress report on the assessment of the sewer mains. All that, we've met all the timelines and expect to continue as we move into the future. Your next goal was the growth strategy, and that was deferred and removed because of the other priorities that arose during the fiscal year. And so the next one was cybersecurity vigilance. For the second year, we're in our second year of employee participation in the Massachusetts Cybersecurity Training Program. We monitor, it's not just employees are doing it, but we monitor employee participation, and we're well above the state average, and really, not ultimately where you'd be 100%, but we're really, doing well, and we continue to impress upon it in terms of department heads and employees to get this training done. And fortunately, we've been solid in terms of not experiencing any unfortunate incidents like we saw in a neighboring community. But we've put in, and ensured that our best practices there in terms of multi-factor authentication and data backups, device management, the antivirus software, email filtering, and link security, and it's always an ongoing challenge and will remain to be one. We had the IT director meet with you just over 3 months ago in March in closed session to discuss, in specific, some of the security measures that were in place, and I think, we'll do that in the upcoming fiscal year as well, as we, establish goals next month in terms of, because I think this is in paramount importance to the community in terms of what's happening out there. Succession planning, we successfully obtained a grant from the UMass Boston Collins Center to develop the succession plan. I and the department heads met with the resource and staff people from the Collins Center, developed the plan. The plan was presented to you back the third week of May. And it hasn't just been put on a shelf. I mean, when I did the reviews with department heads, and also when we've made some conscious actions in areas, as I noted on the slide there, in the health department, there's now an assistant public health director, someone has that responsibility, and so obviously that's succession planning. Clearly in public works, there are defined divisions and tasks of responsibilities and the cross-training and so forth, and so, again, you know, it's the message and the notion has taken hold, and something I think clearly we're much stronger than we were prior to this goal. The town common and the extensions plan, again, we had the listening session not quite a month ago on the improvements around the town center. I know that list is being finalized. We have looked at the minutes from that meeting, and Traffic Safety Committee is considering some of the items that fall within its domain, and I think now that we get past the vacation period in July, I expect in the weeks and perhaps a few months ahead, we can, you know, fully flush out the items that were raised that have to do with tree planting and so forth that were raised at that listening session.
The second bullet, the select board's developing a summary of the key
Yeah.
items.
Yeah.
So the key items are in the minutes. I thought
Okay.
George had volunteered, I thought you guys were gonna work together to look at that.
I know I've seen the minutes. I thought it was going to come back to the board for like we've done in the past. So I didn't know that was George and me to do. I thought it was going to come back to the
Well, isn't that how we've done it in the past? Like when we did the traffic, we worked the summary with you or your staff and then came back to the board with
Okay.
it.
Well, we can
I
do
think
that.
the LGBTQ, Pat pretty much did
Yeah.
because it was
Yeah.
more self-contained.
Right, but yeah, no, I
don't know.
can connect with
Okay.
George and just pull the list up. Yeah, that's fine.
Policies.
Listening. Okay. Oh, select board policies. Again, a select board goal exclusively, but you, as you indicated in the goal summary, you updated the common victular and alcohol license policies, and also more recently, you updated the flag policy. So I think, again, you've been paying attention and acting on the select board policies during the course of the last fiscal year. And then I thought the other thing just to note as a closing slide is, you know, we always have goals, but then we have things that arise that may not have been fully foreseen when we set the goals for the year. And I just thought it was worth noting, not only for the board, but also the community, some other noticeable efforts that took place during the past year. We saw the successful completion of the renovation of the North Chelmsford Fire Station last December, January, with the open house and you know, the closure of the punch list. I mean, and again, kudos to the Permanent Building Committee, Chief Ryan and Deputy Chief Donahue and the others. I mean, it's you know, it's really been a good project and really well assimilated and you know, well integrated into the community and so forth. And so again, I think that's worth noting. Again, months ago, you know, we had the issue of the redistricting and re-precincting. You know, we didn't achieve the outcome that we desired in terms of the state rep redistricting, but I think what we could control in terms of the whole issue of the expanded population necessitated more than 9 precincts. I think the town clerk as the lead did a great job, and I had some support on that in terms of, you know, how do we do this in terms of the two options, what 10 precincts or 11 precincts for town meeting reps, and having good town meeting boundaries in terms of that made intuitive sense and so forth. And I know change is always change, but I think it went as well as reasonably could be expected for what really was an extraordinary period of change that hadn't happened in a couple decades in terms of town meeting composition and so forth. And I worked through the previous one a decade ago. It was minor compared to what was done this time. And then I think a couple of things to note was we obtained the state budget earmarks, the restoration of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Vinyl Square, and the ceremony that was done on Memorial Day was just great. There's just, you know, talk about a job well done by everybody, the volunteer committee, DPW, and everybody, you know, the private vendors and others who contributed to that project was just great. And then we did obtain the funding for the recreational fields, which we have secured, but we're sort of on pause for 2 reasons. One is we're wondering if we can secure additional funding in the current state budget that will get wrapped up in the next couple of weeks, and then also the cost considerations sort of led us to look at, gee, is there as much as we like to do, given what it's really costing in today's market? And then I think the other thing to note was that $680,000 MassWorks grant that was really put together in the last moment by Evan Belansky, as we were sort of looking to provide some assistance up there in terms of the North Chelmsford Water District's main. We successfully obtained that project, and now I'm working, trying to help them to get their reimbursement, the funding from the state on that project. So, again, I think a notable effort during the year. And then transitioning to the more recent one, the acquisition of the town center parking lot at the end of last month. Council closed on that project. And again, it was an important thing when you look at the long term of the town. We were operating under a license, for $1 per year that was terminable at 30 days notice at any time. And I think we've secured permanent parking in the town center with the property owner, former property owner, again, with cooperation from town council, treasurer, collector, select board, and everybody trying to pull that together. And then if you want to speak to the ultimate collaborative project this past year, it certainly shouldn't go unnoticed. The 255 Princeton Street, the former UMass West Campus project with this board and the planning board, really did a masterful job with a great partner in terms of Trammell Crow, great coordination and outreach to the residents and the community, to have an overwhelming town meeting vote in favor of that level of development, and obviously the affordable component by Housing Authority and Choice and so forth. I think when you look back at history of things in the town, that will be one of them that people will note. And then what's in more of an earlier stage, the Vinyl Square Transportation Improvements Concept Plan that committee sort of, really managed well and got resources from NIMCOG to and a private vendor, Howard Stein Hudson, for a conceptual plan on doing that. And now we're applying for grant money to do that, to fund the 25% design, which we then would submit to the state to get on the state's funding list for that project. So, I thought those items, should not go without passing as we look back over the last fiscal year, and as we're about to embark next month on the goals for the new fiscal year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments? Paul, I just have a saved round on the road infrastructure. So we reviewed the plan, I think it was like in February, and then we got the approval for the funding from town meeting in the spring town meeting. Is there a way at some point, and it's not urgent, to put that together to say, okay, well, like with the funding we have, this is how far we can progress with the plan?
Yeah. And I think we'll also, yes, because we're going to do that because, as I said, we're sort of eyeing perhaps whether to come back for additional funding at fall town meeting for, again, to supplement our Chapter 90 funding. So, yeah, we will put that together.
Okay.
And probably next month, because when you think about it, 2 months from now, we'll be signing you'll be signing a warrant for fall town meeting. So when I say it's next month, it's going to have to be next month, but we're on these things. So yes, we'll have that for you. And related to the project, the next thing I have under my reports is, since our last meeting, we did obtain approval from the Massachusetts Attorney General Office for the actions that were taken at the February 24th, 2022 special town meeting, which was the rezoning for the 255 Princeton Street UMass West Campus. In the lengthy letter, the Attorney General notes that even though it passed by an overwhelming margin in the community by more than 2/3, it would have only required a necessary majority vote. So so what's happening now is, I believe the applicant is scheduled to appear before the planning board 2 weeks from Wednesday on the 27th for the initial opening of the hearing for the permitting process for 255 Princeton Street, now that the bylaw has been approved by the Attorney General's office. And then the last thing, and I noted it earlier, the PFAS remediation system at 54 Richardson Road is operational, and Paul McKinley and the Public Works met, and worked closely together, and the original goal was June 30th, and it could have been turned on by June 30th, but Weston and Sampson wanted to make sure that all the ancillary alarm and other type of system was fully solid and secure, so they provided a one-week extension. So on Tuesday, July 5th, the treatment system became operational, and it is treating water. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll do the groundwater sampling next month. Again, it's going to be too early to draw any conclusions for the sampling results that we'll get back from next month in September. And when Paul McKinley has, information that's notable to report, we'll bring them in probably by Zoom to update the board on it. But the good news is the treatment system is out there, it's operational, and again, another well-done job by Public Works and Weston and Sampson in terms of getting the project done on time and within the funding that was allocated for that project. So that's my report for you this evening.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we have appointments. The first one would be a select board appointment. Any questions or comments?
So we do have 2 candidates for this now.
Yeah, what happened is we had, an application came in Friday at 12:32 after the packets were distributed by Richard Cockley interested in serving on the Military Community Covenant, and in your packet was the one from Pandu, who also has expressed interest in the Military Community Covenant Task Force.
So Richard Cockley didn't make it to the packet.
So that's why I sent it out this morning when I arrived. I emailed it out to the board this
Sorry, I
morning
didn't see
to
that.
bring it.
Okay. So do we do it based on the one that came in on time, or do you want to invite them to speak like we usually do? Anybody besides me? I mean, they both have background that I think is relevant.
Virginia, I'd probably like to hear him speak, because getting an application in this morning from Paul, not knowing either of these gentlemen, I need something more to make a decision on.
All right.
Agreed.
Is that okay, Paul? We can
Yeah,
just invite
to your
them to-
point, it's the
invite
select
them
board's
to the
appointment.
next meeting?
Yeah, we can invite them both. I mean, the other thought I had was you could put them both on, because it's not a statutory committee, but.
It's not
whatever.
limited?
No, the Military Community Covenant is a creation of the select board. It's not a,
Because I went on the boards and committees list, and
Right.
there's one vacant position.
right,
Right, I
exactly.
mean,
but
You
put
could do
'em-
that on any committee.
You can do that on, well, you can do that on almost any committee, but the
So-
point is, I mean, Military Community Covenant is not a, statutory committee, I mean by state law and the town charter and so forth, that says there shall be a Military Community Covenant of X number of people. Yeah, I kind of look at it, in all due respect, Pat's on the committee, kind of like the parade committee. The
It's,
more
so
the
it's
mer-
not,
I would
it's
think
not like
more-
a big voting committee or anything.
I
It's
would
like
think
a-
that
That a
people want to
problem,
be on
Pat?
it, you welcome them, but
I don't.
it's not my call.
I don't have a problem.
Pat, how do you, if you don't mind me asking?
What do you think, Pat? Seeing as you're on it.
Well, I mean, then are we going to have 13 people on it if 5 more apply? I mean,
No, we just say it's full.
it's, like you say, I'm on it, so I'm going, whatever the rest of the board decides.
How many people are on it right now, including the one vacancy?
7.
7.
So 8.
And we've had a vacancy,
manageable.
we've had a vacancy for quite some time, right?
Well, just, a few months, yeah.
3 months, yeah. So it's not like this.
7's a good number, though, too. 8 not as good.
Yeah, we have a lot of contested
So will
votes.
this,
I bet it's crazy in there.
100% come out. Pat.
Whether to serve hot dogs or hamburgers at
There you
the.
go.
I'm sorry, Ken, what were you going to say?
nothing, I answered my own question.
I'm okay with appointing both of them, if that's what the board wants to do.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm more,
Yeah.
and just cap it. Okay, are you okay with it?
Okay, so I'll make a motion to appoint Pandu and Richard Coakley to the Military Covenant Committee Task Force. Military Community Covenant Task Force. Are we doing 3-year terms expiring June 30th, 23?
One was an unexpired term on, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, because it would be fine. Do it for 1 year. And that way, if it's a real disaster, we're only stuck with it for 1 year.
I'll second that motion.
So,
You could,
Yeah. So the motion was for both of them for 1 year.
Yep.
We have
Correct.
we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
And then I have 4 appointments. Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee, Sheila Pichette, for a 1-year term expiring June 30th, 2023. Economic Development Commission, Andy Grasrick, for a 3-year term expiring 6/30/25. Historical Commission, Pandu, once again, for a 3-year term expiring 6/30/25. And then the Robertsfield Advisory Committee, Dan Leahy, for 1-year term expiring June 30th, 2023.
Any discussion? We'll take a motion, Ken.
I'll make a motion to approve the town manager's appointments as presented.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Paul, before we move on to
Aye.
minutes, 5-0. I just have a question about, so when I was looking at these, I was going back into that boards and committees list on the website.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk identified for all of the boards and committees?
I will do that. What's happening is they're not
Sure.
reporting it to the clerk.
But
I can-
are we asking
Yeah.
for the information?
Yeah, but I will step it up.
All right.
Yeah, I get I get a letter from Trish about every August for the Military Community Covenant about who the chair and vice chair.
Oh,
And
okay,
I always
I've never
reply.
seen that, so
Yeah.
it's just that we're not getting,
Yep,
okay.
I'll step up, okay.
All right, on meeting minutes, I have an announcement on determination of releasability for executive session minutes. The following minutes were deemed okay for release, May 23rd, 2022, Segment 3, and June 2nd, 2022. The following minutes were approved not for release, May 9th, 2022, Segments 1 through 6, May 23rd, 2022, Segments 1, 2, and 4, and June 6, 2022, Segments 1 through 3. That brings us to liaison reports. Mark, do you have anything?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
George?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention about a good friend of mine who passed away this week, and Paul Trevanian, he was the treasurer at the St. Fontenot's Church, but also he, for many years, served on the Senior Center Advisory Committee, and he was very helpful. He was a bright man. He was a CPA, and he was, I don't know, he was on there for many years. So,
Okay, thank you, George.
just condolences to the family, and, we lost a good man, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
Yeah, a couple quick. The last ribbon cutting was about a week and a half ago at Shakeaholic, which is at 61 Central Square. They make really good, healthy drinks. Try them out, all different flavors. They're all good. Highly recommended. And also from the library, the concerts at McKay have started up again for the summer. Every Wednesday in July and August at 6:30, there's a concert at McKay outdoors. If it rains, it relocates to the senior center. It's always fun. You just, if you think of it, bring your chair. They do have some chairs there, but if you want a more comfortable one, you have to bring your own. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. And I just have one, Paul. I got an inquiry. The last traffic report had the data that they took on Swain Road and Dunstable, the traffic counts.
Yep.
When there was a previous comment made by Chief that he needed that data and he was looking into doing a possible truck exclusion on Swain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the status of that is, or will we do that in the next traffic report?
Yeah, I will follow up on that.
Okay. I didn't know either.
You gonna ask Ken? You gonna ask Ken if he has anything?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ken, do you have any?
I only wanted to make one comment. I just wanted to congratulate the parade committee on what they did. I attended all the events, and the new concert they did this year was just fantastic. And congratulations to Eric Lindstad for putting that on. And I know they were all a little nervous about what the attendance would look like, and the Common had a great turnout. So great job to all of them. They did a great job. And the parade was fantastic, and it really gave that hometown feel. After COVID, I think it was much needed. So congratulations.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, it's 7:51. I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session to consider the value of real property, to assist the Fire Station Study Committee, review executive session meeting minutes from July 27th, 2022, segment 1, and not to return.
June 27th.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Mark?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Ken? Ken? Oh,
Said it
you-
twice.
you're muted, but I can read your
Aye,
lips.
sorry about that. Yep.
And I vote aye. Thank you.